All right. Well, thank you all for being here today, and both here in attendance and also on our live stream. We have a real treat here today to talk about property taxes. First of all, are any of your property taxes, are you paying too little in property taxes? Will you raise your hand? Okay, nobody's raising their hand. Are you paying too much in property taxes? Everybody's raising their hand. Okay, all right. So it's one of those problems that just continues to fester across the state, and it's an important one that the legislature has continued to look at, that local governments have continued to look at, and it's something that we've really got to get a hold of. And it's also important to think about, what are the best forms of taxation and to fund kind of the limited roles of government. And when you're thinking about those, there's a lot of things that we could tax. You could tax people's incomes, which fortunately, I say fortunately, Texas is one of 9 states that doesn't tax personal income, okay? You have sales taxes, which is where the state gets most of its revenue collections. But across the state, when you look at total revenue collections, 50% of it, if you include local government property taxes, 50% of it comes from property taxes, okay? So it's a major portion of the tax collected across the state. And as we know, it's one that influences our budgets, our decisions where to live, and things along those lines. And so as Milton Friedman said, government spending is taxation. So we've also got to look at the spending side of the equation as well, not just the overall tax burden, because really the burden comes from the amount of government spending. Okay, so we've got a lot of good things to talk about today. So let me go ahead and introduce our great panelists. So the first one is Senator Paul Bettencourt, and he will be with us on Zoom. And he was elected to the Texas State Senate in 2014. He previously served 10 years as Harris County Tax Assessor Collector, where he introduced smart government at the Harris County Tax Office. In the most recent legislative session, he successfully passed Senate Bill 2, which was the landmark property tax reform that helped to put a lot of good transparency items in there. It brought down the rollback rate to 2.5%, which we'll talk about all this and look at some of the issues that were going on. And then Senator Bettencourt also worked during the 86th session to earn himself the distinction of Senate MVP by Capital Inside, Bull of Brazos by Texas Monthly, and was given the Citizens' Choice Award by Empower Texans. Has also been called an architect of tax relief by Governor Greg Abbott. Please help me welcome Senator Paul Bettencourt. The next one that we have here on stage at the end down here is Mayor Craig Morgan. Mayor Craig Morgan was elected to serve as mayor of Round Rock in May 2017, Round Rock, Texas. Prior to being elected to his current seat, served as council member to Place 1 from May 2011 through May 2017, and was elected to mayor pro tem in June 2016. He currently serves on St. David's Round Rock Medical Center Board of Trustees, Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization Policy Board, and Round Rock Campus Advisory Committee for ACC. You're busy. Just a little bit. Is a Leadership Round Rock graduate and previously served on the Round Rock Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, the Chasco Family YMCA Board of Directors, and the Leadership Round Rock Planning Board. Please help me welcome Mayor Craig Morgan. And last but certainly not least, this is not Representative Dustin Burrows. Representative Burrows unfortunately couldn't make us, but he sends his best wishes to everyone. They're talking about the rules and having the rules debate on the House floor right now, so he's not here. But in his place is James Quintero. James Quintero has been working at the foundation since the beginning of time. No, I think he started probably, 2008, 2009?
I'm coming up on 13 years.
Okay, a little while. And we've got to know him really well over the time that I've been at the foundation. And he's done a lot of great work on local government transparency, property tax relief, and a number of other areas, and just all around good American. And so he has been nice enough to join us here on the panel today. So thank you, James. Please give him a warm welcome.
Oh, thank you. Pleasure.
And I guess I should say I'm Dr. Vance Ginn. I'm the chief economist at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and also have worked on property taxes and different issues along the way. So what I'd first like to start off with Senator Paul Bettencourt is a question about, one, what's something about you that I didn't mention that most people probably don't know? What's a fun fact about Senator Bettencourt? I want to ask each one of you about this. And then number two, how would you lay the landscape right now, going into session and thinking about property taxes and what the problems are currently, and then we'll decide. We'll go through some of that throughout this panel. So Paul Bettencourt, I'd like to turn it over to you first.
Well, thanks, Dr. Ginn. Well, let's see, a fun fact, they were calling me Uncle Paul as far back as my days at A&M before it got picked up by the Republican Party and then, in use now. I'm sad that we didn't have my counterpart from the House, Chairman Dustin Burrows, because if y'all haven't seen it, he's got a beard that looks like something out of the Civil War at this point.
Yeah.
So Quintero cannot match, is not a stand-in for Chairman Burrows. But we did spend the off-season talking to a lot of taxing jurisdictions directly about SB2, which was the major property tax reform and relief bill that was passed in the last session. Also, I was a co-sponsor of House Bill 3, which is the education bill that was shepherded by Representative Huberty and Senator Taylor as chairman. Now, it's important because the combination of the two has not been done anywhere that we can find in the state, in any state in the union as far back as at least World War II. No one tried to do property tax reform and education reform at the same time. It's a very important concept because over half the bill that people pay is absolutely their school taxes. And as somebody who'd been long-term critical of Robin Hood, like I know James Quintero and Dr. Ginn, you've been, that was an important thing because we had to basically put our money where our mouth is from the state to the tune of about $5 billion worth of property tax relief before we could go to people like Mayor Morgan and say, oh, by the way, we've reduced your rollback rate to only 3.5%, but the state's got a hard 2.5% increase on property taxes on the school side. Now, the result of that has been a strong success, even though the bill SB2 itself, it was effectively delayed due to a COVID declaration because, quite frankly, at least this Aggie and anyone else that I know of wasn't smart enough to figure out that we were going to have a 254 wide county pandemic. Now, the good news is that well over half the cities stayed below the 3.5% level and down, like Mayor Morgan did. Several cities went to the no new revenue rate, which was great news because that means there's no tax increase at all on the residents, and they did it really because by the force of the bully pulpit, which is the last thing taxpayers need to see, Dr. Ginn, and I think the audience would agree, is a big, giant tax increase without a public vote in the middle of a double Texas whammy of COVID and energy shock. Now, we're just seeing some light at the end of the tunnel for the energy folks in the audience because we're looking at $50 a barrel oil and our gas pricing is about $2.70, pick a number, last time I checked. The importance of all this is that we have got to slow the growth of government. Now, I'll sit that way you can see my hand line up here. Basically, what had happened in the 10 years prior to that bill passing, we had growth of government that was as strong as 5% on schools, 7% on cities and counties, and 9% a year on special districts. That's preposterously high. Taxpayers cannot handle that type of growth. So the fundamental breakthrough on SB2, and I wish Chairman Burrows was here because he says it actually better than the bill author. He said that we had not changed the rollback rate in Texas for 38 years, which meant that we had an artificially high 8% rollback rate. When you add in the growth of the tax roll, et cetera, first-time homestead exemptions, government could grow at 12, 13, 14% a year, and it was eating people out of house and home, and their businesses were at risk. Now, that major change, and it is a once in a generation, it may be two generation in this case, change of taking that 8% all the way down to 3.5%, and then on the school side, busting that 8% down to 2.5%, is really flattening out the tax this year. And already we've seen ourselves, we're no longer accelerating to take first place from New Jersey on tax rates in the union. In fact, we didn't even catch up with Illinois in second place. We were third. It looks like we've already fallen back to fifth or sixth. And so what's happening is values go up, tax rates are coming down, and the result is that the tax bills are basically flattening at this point in time. Yeah. And flattening because in House Bill 3, we had a 7-penny reduction last year in tax rates. We've got additional tax rate reductions this year. And because values have arisen, SB 2 at this point in time will be in effect in 2021. And we've also got some legislation coming from Chairman Burrows and I to do some cleanup bills on that. Yeah. So I'm excited because I have been almost, James mentioned he'd been working for TPPF for 13 years. There was a bus trip that now Lieutenant Governor Patrick and I took to come up to the legislature to advocate for tax relief in 2003. And it was great to be there in 2019 to pass it and to see the effects of it statewide. And that's an important point of keeping our businesses and our homeowners whole is basically to flatten out those tax bills. Yeah. So it's been a good first year, even though I'll tell you, as in the legislature, it felt like we were just in session the entire year because we were Zooming or meeting constantly. And then Chairman Burrows and I, along with TPPF and Kevin Roberts as president, you guys were great. When we saw an outbreak of taxation in a city, Pflugerville, I could count a whole bunch of locations, everybody got on and started, tweeting and having a discussion on social media. Because the important thing about this is that what SB 2 will give you now is that when that tax rate gets above the voter approved rate, it's up to you, the taxpayer, to vote on whether to increase it or not. Now, I hope you make a better decision than the folks in Austin did, because they voted 58-42 to raise their property taxes by double digits, like 20%. I wouldn't have done that, but it's up to you to decide in the future. So yeah. I'm very happy about the work the legislature did. Both houses came together and passed that bill. It's and then amplified it with what happened with school finance. So it's a great start, and nowhere else in the nation that we know of did both of them in the same legislative session for a very long time.
Yeah. No, thank you for that great overview, and we'll be digging into these different areas throughout this session here today. And I think it's important to talk about, like Senator Bettencourt did, where the rollback rate, which is how much revenue a city or county can bring in, was 8%. Right? They could raise it up to 8% without any sort of voter approval. Then you had to have a petition in place to vote if it goes above that amount of increase. And so they brought that down to 3.5%, and it's an automatic election now, to where if they go above the revenue of 3.5% growth, then there's an automatic election. That's why you're saying that we get to vote on it, right, within wherever you live. So it's important. However, there could be some complications along the lines there. We saw a number of people that were testifying last session for and against this and everything else. And so I'm thankful for Mayor Morgan being here today to kind of give his insights on what he saw last session and what's been going on good in Round Rock. And also, first though, what's a good fun fact for you?
Thank you for having me, and Joy, it's an honor being here with the Senator Bettencourt and the panel, and sorry that Representative Burrows didn't get to make it, but totally understand. I saw the hands raised. The hands for taxes are too high. Everybody raised their hand. Well, I tell you to move to Round Rock, because we believe that our taxes are pretty minimal for as long as I've been involved with it. Not because of me, just great strategic planning. I'm born in Freiburg, Germany, and I was adopted. So that was a fun fact. My mom and dad chose me. They always told me I was chosen. And thank God they did choose me, because they probably give me back now if they had to take me back. So bless her heart, she was a teacher. She passed away about 8 years ago, and during these last couple years I had some personal health issues I've been fighting, and I'd love to be able to pick up the phone and talk to her. So if your mom and dad are still alive, hug their neck, because you just don't know when.
Amen.
For us as a city in Round Rock, we don't feel like we're greedy. I know that the topic of it is, we feel like through good strategic planning, we have always done what our taxpayers want. And I'll give you some examples of that through our strategic planning. But, way before, and I agreed with the intent of Senate Bill 2. Any elected official that does not agree with any kind of transparency probably shouldn't be sitting at a dais at all. And I'd like to commend our city staff, because we just got our 5th star from the comptroller's office. We're one of 12 cities in the state of Texas that has done that. But even before Senate Bill 2 came in, we months in advance, or a month in advance, we start telling the public, showing them what we're going to do. Here is our budget. Come and talk to us. And I'll give you some stats just real quick on what we did this past year. And this isn't just this year. We've done it every year. So we had social media impressions of 566,158. We did a budget video. We do a budget video every year. That we had 28,752 views. Total number of individual engaged users was 16,415. Clicks to our budget web pages, budget blogs, 9,224. We even spend on our Facebook ads, we spend ads to talk about our property tax rate information and stuff. And I'll tell you where I am on, I think cities do their best for their citizens, but I'm not going to sit here and slam other cities for what they do. They, as the senator said, you elect who you put up there, and I know that every decision I make is a consequence. And it could be a good consequence that they want me back, or it could be a bad consequence that I'm going home and I get to play some golf and do the things that I like to do. But what was hard for us on Senate Bill 2 with the hard cap at 3.5 is that we felt like, as a city that has strategically planned well and had a tax rate at, I think, about 43 cents when that came out, we were being punished for the cities that haven't done well, because if their tax rate's 68 cents, they have more flexibility than someone that has been doing the job correctly, or at least thinks that we've been doing correctly. And so that's where we struggled with, because there are times, I'm not going to hide the fact, we have raised taxes when we've talked to our citizens, and they have supported it. But I'll give you an example. Since I've been on the council since 2011 in Round Rock, our average increase per year on taxes, property taxes, city taxes, has been $39. Take that up to about $360 for total. That's about $3 a month. But we've got a world-class police, fire. We put our money into core services. And I think where cities have gone maybe the direction where it gets competitive with the state is that they're passing bonds through COs that are the feel-good stuff. I am a firm believer of certificates of obligations to allow us, and I'll tell you what we did in Round Rock. We do a biannual survey every year I've been there. And every year, the number one complaint, traffic. What are you doing for traffic? And so we went ahead and passed a little over $200 million bond package, I may be getting that wrong, in the millions, to do 5 major road projects within 5 years. We went to the citizens and told them, hey, this is what we're going to do. But it was for core infrastructure. For other things like parks, sports centers, we're the sports capital of Texas. We go to the voters and say, is this something that you want in your community? So I think you've got to, I know there's a bill I think out there right now to do away with COs. I think that, we would support putting some restrictions on COs, because it's important, because our citizens do want services, and it does cost money. And I just saw a deal the other day on our average, there's a concern about median income rising faster or slower than taxes. In Round Rock, in 2018 to 2019, our average median income was $2,000 increase. Taxes have only increased for $326. And a lot of that's because the tools the state has given us. Everybody knows about Dell Technologies. We had entered a 3-year agreement with them. They bring us sales tax, and that sales tax is used to help offset cost, number one. Number two, our voters back early in the late 80s, they did a vote to reduce property taxes by half a penny. That saves our taxpayers this past year 14 pennies. So if you want to use property tax and sales tax, I know Vance and I have had this conversation, give cities the opportunity to go up to a half cent, but limit them to only doing it for property tax reduction. And now that we have online sales and more cities are getting flushed with sales tax, well, in the rural areas, they may get a 3 cent, 4 cent, 5 cent reduction. But you got to make them use that half cent for property tax reduction. Yeah. And so I think we have a great story to tell. Again, I think there's some things with Senate Bill 2 that I have that we thought caused some confusion. And I'll be glad to talk about that as we go. But I think overall, the intent of what Senate Bill 2, I think I totally agree with. I just think I had problems with how it punished cities that have been doing it correctly, and now we lose some of that flexibility. Sometimes we had to go above 3.5%. Not always, but you can see what it is in dollars, and that's how we work. That's how I try to work to our citizens. Here's what's out of your pocket, and there's a calculator now that's required. We've had the calculator at the city for 3 or 4 or 5 years, so a citizen can walk in, put their value in, and they know exactly what their tax bill is. And so, nice. I'd like to see, you said something about the legislature coming up and all that. I really would like to see that cities and the state working better together. I mean, we're economic engines for the city. The state's given us tools, and because of those tools, Round Rock's been able to do what they've done. And if we lose those tools, we're not going to have the Texas miracle. The people will leave. I mean, the tools that the legislature has given us so far is so crucial. And I think there's other things that can be looked at through the tax code. And I've stated that to my senator and my state rep on some things to give us some additional tools through the tax code. So I'll be glad to talk about those as well. So thank you. Yeah,
that's a great intro overall, and to give us some good things to dive into as we go through this. James, what's a fun fact for you? And also, what are some of the things that you've been looking at within local governments and debt and things of that nature that really drive a lot of the property taxes as well?
Sure. So, I didn't want to admit this, but next month I will officially turn 40. I'm starting to feel it.
Poor thing.
So, fun fact, not so fun, I guess. Yeah. But
James, you were just a kid when I was with you. Uncle Paul, what happened to my young nephew?
Time goes quickly, sir. But before I get into that, let me hold up these two gentlemen, because the mayor, I have been that person who has had to take a difficult message into a room who may not necessarily agree with me. So while the mayor and I may not see eye to eye on the issues, I respect anybody who's willing to walk into that room and deliver that message. And then as Senator Bettencourt, as he said, he really did, he and Chairman Burrows both passed some of the most significant property tax reforms seen in a generation. What they did was truly a Herculean task. And I think moving forward, it's really going to make a difference. Now, perhaps one reason why I got selected for this duty today was we recently put out a document called Just the Facts, Property Taxes in Texas's Most Populous Cities, Counties, and School Districts. And what we did, my colleague and I, is we went through and we documented how fast our property tax levies have grown over a 5-year period in the top 10 most populous cities, counties, and school districts, right? And so once we had that measure locked down, then we also said, how has either population and inflation increased over a similar time frame, or how has enrollment and inflation increased, right? And what you see is there's a pretty stark contrast between how fast levies are growing and how moderately paced inflation and population growth are growing. And actually, if you look at the document, what you see is that that trend is really out of whack when it comes to school districts. And I think that's where a large portion of the problem exists. But I don't want to get too lost in the data, because there's a human element here that I think needs to be accentuated. And one of the things that I've had the unfortunate opportunity to do over the last couple of months is I scour the news quite often. And what I'm seeing increasingly are these long lines at food banks. And there's one particularly striking story up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where this reporter interviews a family who's been waiting in line for 12 hours for a meal, right? And so when I think of taxes, I think how does growing taxes affect that person or those folks who are in that situation? And I think that's part of my motivation here, because growing up, we were that people. I come from a very low income background, and my family struggled. I struggled. It's only been as of late where I've been able to achieve some level of success. And so stories like that really impact me and motivate me to try and persuade the legislature to do some good government things, some things to protect the family budget as opposed to the government's budget. And so, while I think the world of what we did last session, I also think there's much more work to be done this session and sessions coming forward. And I hope to persuade y'all and Senator Bettencourt as to what those ideas might be.
Nice. That's a great overview, and thank you for your continued work on this as well. And Senator Bettencourt, kind of diving into Senate Bill 2, one of the things that I think many people expected with their property tax bill was that their property tax bill would go down. Yet I'm hearing some people say, well, look, my property tax bill didn't go down, right? We saw $5 billion in House Bill 3 that was providing property tax relief for that school M&O portion, yet my amount that I'm paying on my taxes is going up. Is that something that you expected, something that we might expect to be different in the following year whenever the rollback provisions really get going, or what's kind of your expectation there?
Look, this is all about the growth of government.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'd love to see some of James's data, because the numbers I'd used were over 10 years of a growth curve. And what had triggered my angst about the taxpayers was that in Houston and Dallas and the major urban areas, the overall taxation of property taxes on an average home, and these would be homes that are $225,000 in value, had hit $5,000, $5,500, and that's a blockbuster on a home budget of that size. Now, the SB2, and no one in the audience has ever heard me refer to it as a cut, because really it was reform and relief and a lot of transparency issues.
Yeah.
Because the first thing you got to do is slow the growth of levies. Levies are the fundamental equation of how you measure the growth of government, because it's the tax rates times the total tax roll equals the amount of money that the jurisdictions take. Now, for example, Mayor Morgan's right about the 3.5% limit as applied to Round Rock, because their increase was 3.2% above the no new revenue tax rate, about 1.3 pennies, but he kept it below the 3.5 limit. And so what people don't think of, and they have to watch over time, is the value of compounding. Now, Uncle Paul, okay, was around when we used to actually have passbook savings in banks, and banks could give you 10% on your money. That's like ancient history at this point. But when you use compounding and slow things down, you get a tremendous amount of tax savings over a period of time. And I call that relief. The initial provision in SB and House Bill 3 on the school side was a 7 penny cut in the tax rate. Right. And that actually for most part, flattened out tax bills on the ISD side in last year. The hard 2.5% cap means that the levy won't go up by more than 2.5% that local property taxpayers pay. Or in the case of Round Rock, under 3.2% in this case. Now, it doesn't mean that individual people that have a very high appraised value increase don't get all the same break, but it also means that people that have a low or a falling appraisal actually see a cut.
Yeah.
So that's how we measure this. And the first thing we got to do, and we've talked about this, is throw the brakes and make government set priorities. Because see, here's what was happening. When the rollback rate was at 8%, and then you got the value of new construction, which like in the city of Dallas could have been 5% per year for a while, and then the value of new homestead exemptions, et cetera. Property taxes, levies were growing at 12, 13, 14%, a very high rate of increase. Now, when you look at that measured against any statistic, median income, whatever, household income, there's all sorts of stuff you can measure against. It was growing about two to three times faster than Texans' ability to pay. And that was good. That was every year. So people were getting farther behind. So by combining, House Bill 3 and SB 2 together, and also, and this is very important, we've changed a lot of the discussion in major taxing units. Because before, and Quintero knows this, and there'll be people in the audience, I'm sorry I can't see you, because I'd be pointing you out, because we did so many tours across the state. And when people started speaking up, that slowed this concept, because it used to be, well, I'm not raising your taxes because I'm not raising the tax rate. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not true, okay? And people know it, and they certainly know it now. There was one city councilwoman in Waxahachie who just brought that point up, and she stopped the entire city council from making a change because she objected. Now, it's because we're changing the culture of this. In Texas, we need to set priorities, and then we need to go to the folks and say, hey, listen, the mayor's got a project, whatever it is, and let the voters ratify it. And I think that we've really turned the corner on that. Should I say? I don't want to call it. It's a public policy pattern that we needed to lead back. That's old Texas. We need new Texas, which is staying within the people's ability to pay. That's very important. And I knew we were going to win this fight when back in 2019 in February, because we had been doing road shows in the Senate, courtesy of Lieutenant Governor Patrick, since 2019. An intrepid group of senators, Kelly Hancock, Senator Creighton, Senator Perry, Senator Paxton, actually Senator Hinojosa, and Senator Eddie Lucio, who actually ended up voting for the bill from the Democrat side. We traveled all around the state. Yeah. And when we came to that last hearing, we had over 100 people plus testify. Not a single regular person, not a homeowner, a business person, even in the People's Republic of Austin, testified that they were against the bill. It was only the paid lobby and cities that actually, we had one city that sent, nearly a dozen people. Yeah. Their mayor, their police chief, fire chief, everybody, okay, to testify against it. Fortunately, no one listened to them because their taxpayers need the same type of break that Mayor Morgan's given their residents. Mm-hmm. So with any of these big changes, there's always more to do, but you've got to recognize that this was an entire culture shift on spending and growth of government in the state of Texas.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, Senator Bettencourt, and one that I think is something that those in the audience and watching the live stream will also need to take into consideration when they're looking at their individual bill. Doesn't necessarily mean that there was could be a cut of 7 cents just on theirs, but it was across across government, right? So you have to think about what each one of those local taxing entities were doing with their overall tax levies. And so hopefully we can continue to see slower growth and even cuts over time. I think those would be important things to look at. One of the things that, so I live in Round Rock, and one of the things that I've noticed
And
about—
Dr. Ginn, if I could,
Yeah,
Dr.
go ahead.
Ginn, it's important to also talk about the magnitude of how much money this is. Okay?
Sure, yeah.
To stop Robin Hood and reverse Robin Hood, which has really been an insidious problem, because the Robin Hood was basically, as values increased on the school side, the state sent less into education.
Right.
So we were balancing the budget, and Quintero knows this, and you do too, Doctor. Several $billion a year would be balanced on the back of local taxpayers.
Yeah.
So the state legislature made the huge commitment of $5 billion in a biennium. And, I'm very optimistic that I only have one vote, but I think we're going to maintain that. And because that's how much money it takes to slow things down. Because, for example, school spending from all sources is about $60 billion a year. Okay. So you have to throw lots of billions to slow that train down and and make that 7 penny cut, which we're maintaining this year. And I hope that we maintain it, in the future.
Yeah, no,
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay. I agree. We need to keep that going. So, Mayor Morgan, I was wondering about some of the priorities that you're setting and what you're looking at when you go through your budget to figure out, because of course you have different revenue sources that are coming in. You got your property taxes that are coming in, your sales taxes that are coming in, maybe other fees as well. And so one thing that I've kind of thought about is, what if, the state has a spending limit that's based on personal income growth? There's some move maybe to move it to population growth and inflation. What if there was a spending limit on that side of the equation relative to just a limit on, or a growth rate of the rollback on the taxes that looked at all revenue sources to see how you limit the budget growth over time? So a combination of those. Where are your priorities? How do you set those? And then what do you think of maybe a spending limit at the local level?
Yeah, the senator said it. I mean, I think where Round Rock has been really successful, and it's not due to anything I've done, this is years of planning, is that we have a strategic planning retreat every year. And we have 5 goals. And those 5 goals can either change, they can be modified. And when you do that, then you stay on track for your priorities. And you don't get carried away with, the pet project that you want maybe as an individual that may only impact, half your citizenry. Where we focus on the most is, as I always tell people, it's not a Republican issue or a Democrat issue. What we do, if you stick to the core services, is we focus on people issues. When I go block walking, people say, "Are you a Republican or Democrat?" And I say, I'll tell you what I am. Voting record's out there, but you can go look. But I say, hold on. Do you care who comes and fixes that pothole, a Republican or Democrat? If your house is on fire, do you care if it's a Republican or Democrat that sends the fire department? And you got to make people think. So what we've done really well in Round Rock is stayed and focused on core services. Transportation, police, fire, water is a huge issue for us. And then when it gets to the other amenities, we've had 2 bond elections. One in 2013 was our last one. And we built a public training facility because our citizens want to be safe. We're always considered one of the safest cities in America. We built a new library. We will be. And then before that, though, it was 12 years before that. So we don't go have bond elections every other year or every 2 years. So we have time as we grow and do the things that we need to do. For us, our biggest challenge is growth. I talked to a realtor 2 weeks ago. We had 9 houses on the market that were for sale. 9. Think about that. In a city of 110,000, 9 houses are on the market. Someone had 100 people walk through a house the other day and multiple offers. So that's our challenge, is how do you get more housing? Because we have created an environment that people want to live in. And I think for cities, the tools are there. I'll give you an example for us. 93% of our properties that are assessed is residential property. Okay? Think about that. 7% is commercial due to people and businesses we've brought to town, the Dells of the world. We just announced another headquarters coming last week, Vance Metals, moving from California, tired of taxation. 46% of property tax comes from that 7%. So it's not on the backs. And then when you get down even more with the sales tax that we bring in through our sports capital taxes, tourism, we bring in people to spend money. When you get down to just residential people paying taxes, the residences, it's about 20%. So we're doing some good things in Round Rock. And I think it's available to all cities. I can't have a refinery in Round Rock, Texas. But you know what? There's economic development tools for people in East Texas, West Texas, to bring these companies and try to get these companies. They bring jobs. They help offset your tax base. Yeah. You know, no one likes to pay taxes. Look, I don't like paying them, but guess what? I don't like paying my phone bill. I don't like paying my electric. I don't like doing any of those things. I like paying for my golf. And at a certain point, I think some of this, and that's never mentioned, and it's, you know, not politically correct, but the reality of it is that you do have people that are low income that are struggling. There is no doubt, and the government has to find ways to raise them up. But there's a lot of people out there not taking care of priorities. Self-responsibility has left this country. And people don't have priorities. And I'll see it in my city where a newlywed couple wants to be keeping up with the Joneses and they go buy a $500,000 house. They're one cancer diagnosis away from being bankrupt. My mom and dad never had that opportunity. They had to live in an apartment first, then a house. They didn't get their house till later on in life. And we're losing that sense. And that's what sometimes people forget. Now, again, the low income that have struggled, that are fighting, get it. But there's a lot of people that aren't setting their priorities. And as the senator said, they want us to set our priorities, but we also need our citizens to help set our priorities as well, because the data's here. An average of 40-something bucks a year since 2011.
Got it. We're about to get to Q&A, so get your questions ready for this great panel. James, we've heard a lot about what's been going on in the past and what's happening now. I wonder what maybe we could start looking forward to the future of some key reforms within property taxes that we may need to look at in continuing to reduce some of those burdens over time. You know, one of the things that I've been working on, and you have as well, is trying to figure out a way of eliminating property taxes. I think that's going to be a ways down the road a little bit, but how do you figure out a way maybe to even eliminate the school M&O property tax, which is about half of our property tax burden in the state, by broadening the sales tax base, things of that nature. But what other sort of good government reforms, maybe local spending limits, what would you have that you could recommend before we get to Q&A time of what we should be looking at?
Wow, we're almost out of time. Huh?
I know.
That
time
goes
flies
quick.
and you have this great discussion.
So I've got a lot to say and a little time to say it. So let me see if I can pack a lot of stuff in.
Good.
So I have no doubt that Round Rock is an attractive place, right? Because my good friend lives there, and he tells me so. But I also have to wonder if Round Rock's population growth isn't being at least influenced by the number of people who can't afford to live here in Austin, right? If you look at the Travis County data, what you see is that the median taxpayer in Travis County pays about $10,000 in property taxes for cities, counties, school districts, and special districts. It's a lot of money. It's almost $1,000 per month, right? And I know myself personally, my wife and I evacuated out of Austin a long time ago because we recognized that we couldn't afford this place. Government spending was just driving taxes too high too quickly. And so we escaped to Butte, Kyle, and have been there for a long time up until recently. So I do wonder if the suburbs on the periphery of Austin aren't benefiting, at least in part, by the excessive taxation being levied here in Austin. Secondarily, I think government debt is behind a lot of what we're experiencing now. I think it's driving a core portion of our property tax bills, and it has not let up. If you look at Dallas ISD, they just put forward the biggest bond in Texas history. In the middle of a pandemic, people are jobless, they're struggling to put food on the table, and there's widespread economic misery, and you have school districts putting forward massive bond propositions. It was a $3.5 billion bond proposition. Voters approved $3.2 billion of that. Down in San Antonio, you had the biggest bond proposition put forward in San Antonio history at the same time. San Antonio ISD put up a $1.3 billion bond propositions. You have examples like this throughout the state where school districts are very clearly addicted to debt, and we need the legislature to step in and implement smart policy to cool down on the debt situation. I also think certificates of obligation need significant reform. You're seeing massive problems in that area. I'll give you just one example. Down in Bexar County, the county was
where San Antonio's at.
Where San Antonio's at was recently embarrassed within the last few years. They issued a CO for $750,000 for a public art project called Plethora. It was a big, giant silver face that they wanted to put in the middle of a park. That's not the kind of certificate of obligation expense that we ought to be allowing local governments to engage in. And by the way, what makes this really embarrassing for Bexar County is the fact that they got halfway into the project and realized it wasn't going to be a $750,000 project. It was actually going to be $1.5 million. And so they stopped construction. I have no idea where it is now, but at least a year ago, it was just part of a public art project. So COs need significant attention and reform. When you look at another portion of the problem, it's spending, in my mind. I think local governments spend too much, which is why taxes have to be high. How do we address the problem? Well, I want to go back to something that Senator Bettencourt did in HB 3. Embedded, in fact, it's actually on the very first page of House Bill 3, is a mechanism to begin addressing school district spending. What it does is it requires an efficiency audit to be undertaken before a school district can raise taxes. Basically, the idea was to bring in an outside set of eyes, take a look at how school district spending is going, and then make adjustments before we go to voters with an ask for new taxes. And it didn't quite come out like that, but it's pretty close. I think that same requirement needs to be extended to cities and counties. We need to get city and county spending under control now. And particularly in the larger jurisdictions, I'm thinking your big counties, your most populous counties, and cities as well. That needs to be a requirement before they can raise taxes, because we're in a new world now. Our unemployment rate is 8.1%. We have long lines at food banks. People can't put food on the table, and yet our government employees are raising taxes and spending more. That's unacceptable. We need to get we need stronger controls on spending so that eventually over time we can lower taxes.
Can you bracket those cities, please?
Well, I want to give some time for Q&A now. Who has a question? And Robert up here has the mic, so here we go.
Speak to us a little bit about the impact of hospital districts and the impact on county taxes. I live in Tarrant County.
Okay.
We've recently passed about $1 billion for John Peter Smith in Fort Worth. Talk about the growth, and are there any limits that can be placed on that type of growth that would benefit the taxpayers in the long run?
Sure. Who would like to go on that one?
I don't have a hospital district, so
Okay.
I probably can't answer that question.
Senator Bettencourt, do you have thoughts? Oh, mute. Hit the mute button. There we go.
Let's see.
There we go.
Yes.
James, you said that the average taxation in Austin is now $1,000 a month.
It's $10,000 annually, and I was rounding up. You're probably looking about $900 per month. Yeah.
Okay, $900 a month. And so do you know what the proportion of it is the hospital district, and on what average home?
I'll get that information for you right now.
Well, to answer the gentleman's question, the bill that came out of the Senate had a 3.5% limit on hospital districts and all taxing jurisdictions. The bill that came back from the House did not. That's just part of what it takes to make legislative sausage work and get a bill passed. So if you're in an urban county, for example, like Harris, your special districts like the hospital district, the flood control district, et cetera, are not covered by the new rollback rate, but the main county is. So this is stuff to look at, because obviously hospital districts could have the potential of explosive growth due to the fact of just the cost of healthcare. So it's something that we attempted to address, and we're going to be looking at those spending curves as well. Because look, I mean, even $900 a month is, on average home, it's probably 400,000. I'm not sure where it is or more in Travis County. That's a big piece of change for a family to be paying if they haven't figured out how to get to, Round Rock or, Utica or Pflugerville, which, by the way, when they got into a fight and TPP helped with that, they actually dropped a priority. They were going to spend some money on their shooting range, decided not to, and actually dropped their tax rate below the no new revenue rate, even besting Round Rock. So you're going to have to look at priorities like this. The hospital districts are big, and they need efficiency audits because they're blockbusters. And for example, Health and Human in the Texas budget is 36% of all expenditures. And like Quintero's mentioning, I've been pushing for zero-based budgeting in major taxing units in bills for several sessions. And we've passed spending limit bills, Senator Hancock's bill, several sessions. And I'm hoping we got a shot at passing it in the House this time too.
Does that involve special districts? That didn't fall under Senate Bill 2 either, did it?
No, we started out with all special, including it was a across the board number that got whittled back, and so I'm always pushing to include everybody in the same set of metrics because, quite frankly, what gets measured gets fixed.
Yeah.
So, Chairman, Central Health under this example is about 4%. And what the example they use is a home assessed at $444,000. The total tax bill for that is $9,000, and then you figure in a couple of $100 extra for the new tax increase that just went into effect. I believe it was 20 to 25% city tax increase. So you can see it's a fairly significant sum. And I will say that there is added urgency to implement city and county efficiency audits because not only have you had a flood of federal dollars and federal aid come in recent months, but it appears that the Biden administration is preparing a $2 trillion stimulus with, again, another huge slug of money to bail out local governments. And so we need to be extra certain that what's being done at the local level is being done properly.
No, you're right, James, because free federal money means that people get used to that spending and then they look to the state or local governments to continue it. And you're right, SB2, we have to look at debts because the SB2 worked on maintenance and operations and exempted voter approved debt because again, it's the concept of if you want to pass that issue like they did in Austin and raise your city taxes 20-25%, boy, I wouldn't be voting for it, but God bless you because that's a blockbuster increase in the tax bill, especially in an area that's been hard hit by an economic downturn.
Mayor Morgan, do you have something?
Yeah, you just had a question. I respect, James and I have our disagreements, and I would agree that there is some push coming from the Austin area, but we do a good job and make it a very inviting place to come, and we do have people coming from all over the country, not just Austin. But you'd mentioned some things that you'd like to see moving forward, and I'd love to get this stuff to Senator Bettencourt's office. But for the Senate Bill 2 for the transparency, there were some requirements.
It's open, Morgan, so you can send it.
Yeah, there were several requirements that we are required to do for notices and all that, and we're totally okay with that. But I will tell you, there were a total of I think it's about 5 or 6. And what was happening is when we came up with it, it would show a tax increase from 0% almost all the way up to 6.2%. So our taxpayers were confused on, what did you raise it up? And so I think that's something to definitely examine to make it a little bit more clear because the people don't know what no new revenue rate means. People don't know, but what they do know is how many dollars is coming out of their pocket. That's what they do know. So that's what we try to really target. Some other things is, as I mentioned, I think it ought to be looked at for the sales tax to give cities the option. I know that some of them are already maxed on their 2, but that half-cent tax reduction from sales tax will help property tax relief, number one. Number two, for us, for cities, we're hamstrung from giving additional homesteads. We can give a percent, up to 20%. Okay, if it's really about affordability, I give a 20% homestead exemption to someone that lives in a $500,000 home, and I give a 20% homestead exemption to the people that James are talking about, the $100,000 homes. Well, who's getting the greatest benefit? So I'm not going to do it. But if you give me $25,000, the capability to give $25,000 off, then I'll be glad to look at that to help our homeowners. So those tools like that, some of those tools the county can do, and we can't do them. And so,
But Mayor, I'm going to disagree with you. The difference is we don't like tools that are fixed numbers, because the whole philosophy of SB2 is to get tax rates lower for both homes and businesses, across the state. And we think it's a much better deal to get those reductions in pennies of tax rate, and not say, well, we're going to stop at $5,000 exemption or 25. Now, you've got a special set of circumstances because you're a bedroom community, high ratio, and I understand some of those issues. But I really want to hear some of your other points are valid, because again, when you pass a 100-page bill and you got to go through conference committee, on short notice, all sorts of things happen. But importantly, we're, at least as my person, looking at things, and we're going to be looking at trying to get tax rates down across the board on everything.
Yeah. And I think another thing you are looking at, right, is clarifying this natural disaster, quote unquote, loophole, and
Yes.
making sure that that's taken out of there, and as well. We only have a couple more minutes left. What other questions do we have? Here's some lightning round questions. Well, one of the things that I want to look at here is, again, what else could we do to make sure that Texas remains Texas, and that we have a low cost of living, relatively speaking, to most other states, keep taxes low, and really be the economic engine, not only of the United States, but really the globe to some degree, where people are just flocking to Texas from other states right now. And a lot of things that we have with the pandemic, as James was mentioning, an 8.1% unemployment rate right now. We're seeing many families struggling. There might be a good opportunity to put us in a better fiscal situation where your tax system doesn't burden us as much as others. And I think that hopefully longer term, we can really look at moving more towards a sales tax compared to a property tax system. Both of them tend to be regressive overall. But I just wonder, where do you all see some of the tax problems come about that are keeping us from being as prosperous as possible? What else should we be looking at?
Dr. Ginn, let me just say this, and Mayor Morgan touched on it, and so did Quintero. Look, right now, Governor Abbott's phone is ringing off the wall on companies that want to come to Texas. And I mean, I'm not doing platitudes. Many of you, the audience, know me one-on-one. What you see with me is what you get. His phone is ringing off the wall. Now, for example, HP moved a big part of their global unit here. They just wanted to escape California. The taxation was killing their folks. The power outages are really difficult for a global business supplier to handle if you're trying to do systems integration, because it's acting like a third world power grid. They were being browned out all the time. They came to my district and they didn't even ask for a tax abatement. They wanted to get the HE double hockey sticks out of there. That's my words, not theirs. All right, and it's not just them. We've got Tesla on the move. We've got Oracle on the move. Mayor mentioned, Dell. We've got Toyota. You name it. It's happening all over the state. And the reason why is because we're keeping our taxation low. Okay. And compared, especially the reason why we had to take action on property taxes is because that's a big hit on capital intensive industries like big heavy industry, petrochemical, et cetera. Heavy iron, major manufacturing. So the good news is that it's stunning how much activity is coming into the governor's office.
Yeah.
You know, and whether, and that's the focal point of people calling, trying to move their business to Texas.
Yeah.
Right now, Texas has been the job economic growth engine of the country more for certainly on average for over a decade. And I think we're going to see that because the amount of activity, business activity that just these companies we've talked about is astonishing.
Mm-hmm.
And notice that I'm not talking about just, you know, energy. I'm actually talking about major systems integrators and IT suppliers and major new manufacturers like Tesla. And we're not even talking about, you know, shooting rockets off and down to Boca Chica. Okay?
I hear you. We're running out of time. I wanted to give the last word to you, Mayor Morgan, and then we can wrap up here. Just maybe a quick 30 seconds.
I think the senator hit it. I think that, you know, I don't think the system's just totally broken in Texas. If it were, these companies would be going other places. I think what we've got to do is fix the system where it needs to be fixed. And as James and I, you know, talked about with COs, I'm perfectly okay with that because you shouldn't be just using COs for projects like he mentioned. Yeah. I would never allow our council to vote on something like that. So I think the tools are in place. I think that you look at some things. I'll give you one other thing that people, it's not popular, but there was a bill a couple sessions ago to look at all the exemptions in the state of Texas. The tax code in Texas is becoming like the IRS code at the U.S.
Right.
There's loopholes, and there's people benefiting from, and as long as that is, guess where that falls on? People like us up here that have to pay taxes because we don't fit any of those exemptions. So I think that's a great bill to look at and examine, but fix the little nuances. And I think, you know, continue to do the things we do, and just hopefully the state won't take the tools away that allow people like us in Round Rock to bring in business, because if you strategize and you put priorities first, you can keep your tax rate at a very minimal rate. Yeah. I mean, it can be done.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for the panel. Please give a applause. That's what we're here to do, to continue to talk about at the TPS policy orientation, is how to keep Texas Texan and make sure that we're that vibrant economy overall to let people prosper. So thank you all again, and have a wonderful day.